Okay, this is the last video for Unit 2, Video 5, and we're going to look at some of the battles here. We're going to discuss three different battles of the American Revolution. The state requires us to not just understand the importance of these battles, but specifically to understand the role that geography played in all three. So we'll look at Trenton, Saratoga, as well as the Battle of Yorktown in this one. First up is the Battle of Trenton. Christmas night, 1776, George Washington moves his troops across the icy Delaware River with about 2,400 men. He advances on the city of Trenton, New Jersey, where he captured 1,500 Hessian mercenaries, which were essentially paid fighters for the British Army. Washington only had 6 casualties. 2 were killed, 4 of his men were wounded, and because Trenton is on a river, it was thought to be a natural barrier for an attack. But Washington actually moves his troops further upstream, giving him the element of surprise when he crosses and attacks Trenton. And it was a huge victory for the colonists, and it also was a huge boost for their morale. You've seen this picture, I'm sure, but this is Washington crossing the Delaware, and you can see how many other boats there are that going across it. So this was the size of the boats they had. So to move 2,400 men, you can imagine how long it took to several of these boats went and came back and went and came back all night long. So that took some time. Here's a battle map of Trenton. So over here across the Delaware is where Washington and his men were camped. This is the city of Trenton, and so Washington, rather than crossing here and the British troops being able to see that, he moves his soldiers way upriver and crosses somewhere up here, and then moves in, and they split up and surround the town before they attack it. So it was very surprising for the British for sure. So your 3 questions here for this one. What role did George Washington play in the war? This is more of an overall question, but he is going to be commander of the Continental Army. You'll need to know that. So he is the commander of the Continental Army. We're going to see Washington again in the next unit as president, but in this particular role, he's going to be the commanding officer. And so, what battle began with the crossing of the Delaware? That's Trenton, the one we've talked about. You will probably see a question if they want to do something with geography. They will probably discuss the Delaware River, and so that'll be a clue for you for sure to know that that's Trenton. And then, how did geography play a role in this battle? It helped Washington with his surprise attack. So the geography here is obviously the river is the main player. So with the Hessians believing that they would be able to see an attack by Washington, he is able to go upstream, cross through with these mini boats that we saw, and then attack Trenton from behind. The next battle we're going to look at is the Battle of Saratoga, which is in New York. The American victory at this battle is the one that convinced the French to join the war on the colonist side. And to me, this is probably the most important battle of the war because of that fact, because it convinces France to actually come help us. As the British marched toward the city of Saratoga, the Americans built fortifications along the Hudson, but also on a ridge overlooking the city. The geographic advantage of having the high ground, as in any battle, proved important as the British are eventually going to surrender here, and this, as I said, will be a huge turning point. It showed France that the colonists had a chance to win, and it would lead them to publicly allying themselves with the Americans, with the colonial cause. Here you can see some of the hills that Washington and his troops took so that they could oversee, so they could oversee the battlefield, so that they could see the British Army and they could fire down on them. And so that gave them a huge advantage. This cannon would probably be located in one of these 2 spots here on this battle map on the right, back here on the Bemis Heights where Gates and his men were. So they were able to fire down on the British from that spot. So your 2 questions that deal with Saratoga. What was significant about the battle? It was the turning point in the war, and it made France decide to join the war on the colonist side. So that would be the big significance of the Battle of Saratoga. What geographical advantage did the colonists have here? They had the high ground. They were dug in, waiting on the British to advance, and so the ability for the colonists to have the hills and the high ground played a huge role for them and gave them an advantage for sure. The final battle that we're going to take a look at is the Battle of Yorktown. This is the final battle, and it takes place in Virginia. It was greatly influenced by the geography for sure on Yorktown. British General Charles Cornwallis had moved his troops to the coast in order to be in close contact with England. The French Navy, however, unbeknownst to Cornwallis, moved in and cut off the escape route of the British. So Cornwallis essentially allowed himself to be surrounded on land because he knew that he could just escape by sea. But the French Navy rolled in without him knowing it and cut off his escape route. And so, with the American troops marching onto the peninsula, they forced the surrender of Cornwallis, and this battle effectively ended the American Revolution. The French Navy provided much needed support for the colonists. As we said earlier, they had no navy, the colonists did. So this was a huge advantage for them. But the geography of the battle also played a major role. Here you can see Yorktown. This is where Cornwallis was. So again, he essentially allowed himself to get trapped. That wasn't a huge concern to him because he thought, well, we'll just get here on the river and sail away. But as I mentioned, the British were there, so they essentially cut off that escape route. So he was trapped. The final thing we'll look at in this video is the Treaty of Paris of 1783. We've already seen the Treaty of Paris 1763, so this is the one that's 20 years later. It ends the American Revolution, and the two major things we have to know are this. Number one, Britain recognized the colonies as an independent nation. Britain says, okay, that's it, you're an independent country. And then the second thing is America is going to gain all of Britain's land west to the Mississippi. So essentially all of Britain's land that they won in the French and Indian War without Canada is now going to be the Americans. So they're going to take the land this side of the Mississippi, east of the Mississippi River. So the Treaty of Paris outlined those two major things. You can see on the map on the right first, the Treaty of Paris of 1783, the lands that were gained by the colonists. And you can see the original 13 colonies on the right and then what they added to with the Treaty of Paris. The map on the picture on the left rather is a painting from the Treaty of Paris of 1783, and you can see the Americans on the left. You can see Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, but what you can't see on the right, because it was never finished, were the British diplomats that worked on the treaty. They did not want to sit for this painting, and so they got up and left because they were upset with it, and so that's the painting that we're left with there. So some questions showing Yorktown as well as the Treaty of Paris. Why was the Battle of Yorktown important? Mainly because it's the last battle of the Revolution. I mean, that's the key to Yorktown, understanding that it is the last battle of the Revolution. And then the geographical advantage here was that the colonists had Cornwallis trapped on a peninsula. Because Yorktown is on a peninsula, they could attack by land and trap Cornwallis. Cornwallis believed that he could sail away, but because of the French coming up the river and cutting off that route, he was really trapped. If you look at your questions on the treaty, why was it important? Two things: it recognized American independence, and it also granted the Americans all of Britain's land, basically in what is today the United States. And then what did it officially give the colonies? It officially gave them independence, right? So it gives them independence as a sovereign nation.